The stars above Vespera, 9 glittered faintly through the thick atmosphere, their light dimmed by the glow of the alien warship Dral's Fong cutting across the sky, like a black blade. Its hull gleamed silver in places, black in others, a patchwork of battle scars and imperial pride. The ship hung in low orbit, engines thrumming faintly, its weapons locked on the human colony below. Admiral Kryll stood at the observation deck, claws resting lightly on the railing, his gaze cold and predatory. To his officers, he looked every bit the war hero the Empire celebrated, broad-shouldered, scales lacquered a regal crimson, crest adorned with polished metals. To himself, this was just another routine strike in a string of tedious conquests. He watched as energy beams rained down on the colony's shield barrier, sparks flaring like dying fireflies. Pathetic, Kryll muttered, his voice a low rasp, carrying the faintest trace of amusement. The deck crew chuckled dutifully. A junior officer approached, eyes flicking nervously to the crackling shield below. Admiral, scans confirm minimal armaments. The colony maintains only atmospheric cannons. No orbital defenses. Kryll didn't bother to look at him. Of course they don't. Humans rarely learn. Each world falls, and the next pretends courage will save them. He tapped the railing with a single talon, watching as the colony's shields flickered, their power grid nearing collapse. He felt no hatred for humans, only disdain. They were noisy creatures, constantly declaring independence, yet folding the moment the Empire arrived. He'd fought wars against foes who made you sweat for victory. This was sport. Below, the shield finally shattered. Explosions bloomed through the colony's outskirts as alien strike craft dove low, laser fire carving through streets. The human defenders scattered, tiny figures, desperate yet hopeless. Kryll's second-in-command, Captain Threx, leaned casually against a console. You'd think after losing half their colonies, they'd stop trying. Kryll smirked faintly. Let them try. At least it keeps the troops entertained. He turned away from the viewport as the colony burned. He didn't need to watch the ending. It was always the same. The Empire descended. The humans fought bravely but poorly, and then another world was added to the map of Imperial control. But even as he walked from the deck, a subtle boredom settled in his chest. War had grown dull. Humanity, for all its noise, simply didn't know how to terrify anyone anymore. That changed an hour later. The message came through as he dined in his private quarters, the faint aroma of spiced meat filling the air. A transmission, intercepted from human channels, trembling with urgency. The humans were mobilizing fleets near Earth. His fleets. His raids. Kryll barely looked up from his meal. They always do, he said. They'll posture, maybe launch a few skirmishes. Then they'll retreat when they see reason. But then Threx arrived in person, breath hissing through sharp teeth. Admiral, reports confirm one of our wings struck near Sol. That caught Kryll's attention. Sol, he repeated slowly. Threx nodded. Earth itself. The Admiral set down his fork, studying the captain's tense expression. A strike? Minor, Threx said quickly. An orbital research facility. It resisted inspection, so we eliminated it. No civilian casualties reported. Just scientists. Kryll leaned back, silent for a moment. Earth had always been treated differently, a central hub, symbolic more than strategic. The Empire never feared its military, but they knew the humans guarded that world with unusual determination. Perhaps it was sentiment, perhaps arrogance. And yet Kryll felt no unease. Let the humans rage. They won't do more than growl. He rose from the table, glancing at the fleet reports scrolling across his wall screens. Several colonies already secured, more falling by the hour. A clean sweep. Humanity dwindling before Imperial power, just as always. And yet, sensors had detected something strange earlier. A single energy signature near one of the conquered colonies, vanishing almost instantly. Too faint for identification. Dismissed as a sensor glitch. Kryll had dismissed it too, until now. As he returned to the observation deck, he stared again at the smoldering colony below. Human survivors were already being rounded up. His soldiers moved efficiently through the ruins, banners of the Empire rising above broken rooftops. Another victory, Threx said lightly beside him. Kryll's eyes narrowed slightly. And yet it feels unfinished. The captain tilted his head. Unfinished, sir? The admiral didn't answer. Instead, his gaze drifted to the stars, to the faint, distant glimmer marking Sol. A thought crept unbidden into his mind, a simple question, one he hadn't considered before. What if humanity wasn't playing the same game anymore? It was nonsense, he told himself. Humans lacked the resources, the coordination, the will. Their technology lagged decades behind the Empire's. And yet that strange energy signature, the unusually swift evacuations from the colonies, the eerie calm in Earth's transmissions, no pleas for mercy, no threats, just silence. Kryll shook the thoughts away. Silence was nothing. Humanity had nothing. Still, when the next colony fell days later, he found himself watching the long-range feeds more closely. The evacuation ships again moved with uncanny precision. Military escorts he didn't recognize guarded them, sleek, unfamiliar silhouettes vanishing into warp space before his sensors could lock on. Threx scoffed at the images. They think running will save them. Kryll said nothing. Because for the first time, as the human ships slipped away like ghosts, he wasn't entirely sure they were running at all. And when a faint, almost imperceptible transmission slipped through human channels, a single, calm voice saying only, "So it begins," Kryll felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Not fear, but curiosity. He watched the stars above Vespera 9, the distant glimmer of Sol, the silent human fleets retreating just out of reach. Something was coming, something calculated. And Admiral Kryll, war hero of the Empire, conqueror of a dozen worlds, realized he might finally face an enemy worth remembering. Admiral Kryll stood in silence as the tactical display bloomed across the deck, its sharp lines and glowing markers outlining the Empire's fleet as it tightened its grip around the human colonies. The entire campaign now resembled a cleanly executed hunt. Yet Kryll's eyes lingered on one particular report: losses near the remote colony of Halidus Prime. Losses. That word had almost vanished from their vocabulary. It wasn't many ships. A skirmish barely worth counting. But the report claimed the entire strike wing had been destroyed in less than 3 minutes. Not retreat. Not routed. Erased. Kryll reviewed the feed. It was fragmented, shot through with static, but the final image remained. A warship sliding out of darkness, its hull shape unfamiliar, angles so sharp they almost blurred into the void itself. Then light. Blinding, clinical. Alien vessels blooming into fire one after another before the transmission died. Kryll had fought hundreds of battles. He knew the rhythm of warfare, the time it took to flank, to overwhelm, to break. This had been no battle. This was surgery. Captain Threx entered briskly, breaking his focus. "Sir, the Council demands you accelerate the push to Earth. They want this finished." Kryll's eyes narrowed slightly. "And the losses at Halidus?" Threx shrugged as though brushing away dust. "A rumor magnified by panic. Rebels. Pirates. Human scavenging Empire tech, perhaps. Nothing more." Kryll let the words hang in the air. Threx believed them, he did not. He replayed the feed again. The enemy ship never broadcast identification, never hailed, never boasted. It struck like a predator that had stalked its prey for weeks, then disappeared without even claiming the kill. That was what unsettled him most. Not the destruction itself, but the silence surrounding it. Humanity had always been noisy in defeat. Angry speeches, desperate pleas, grand declarations. Now nothing. No threats. No surrender offers. Just quiet evacuations and, now, surgical strikes that left no survivors to explain what they'd seen. Kryll straightened, scales catching the cold deck lights. Double the recon nets around Earth. Full spectrum. I want anything moving flagged before it leaves orbit. Threx frowned. You expect resistance? KRYLL studied the empty space where the mystery warship had appeared. I expect answers. Light years away, aboard the human warship Aegis, Admiral Elias Kessler watched his crew move with machine precision across the command deck. No one raised their voice. No one celebrated the Halidus ambush. The Aegis' black armor reflected no starlight, its stealth systems masking every signature until the moment it struck. Kessler's face was carved from stone, lines of age and fatigue etched deeply across his brow. He had commanded fleets before, but never a war like this. Not because the enemy was strong, but because humanity had decided, finally, to stop pretending weakness was its only strategy. A junior officer approached, tablet in hand. Evacuations complete on Vespera 9. No civilian ships lost. Kessler nodded once. That was the point. Every colony the aliens thought they were conquering had already been cleared of critical infrastructure weeks ago. Decoy transmissions kept the Empire convinced they were crippling humanity's core, while the real heart of its defenses, Project Aurora, remained buried, unseen, waiting. He turned to the holomap looming above the deck. It displayed not only the Empire's fleets, but the growing network of human wormhole gates threading silently through deep space. Each one was a blade poised behind enemy lines. They'll come for Earth next, Kessler said quietly. His operations chief glanced up. Let them. Kessler studied the enemy positions, the arrogance and how tightly they clustered their forces, believing numbers alone brought security. He thought of the Halidus skirmish, how KRYLL's ships had barely managed to send even fragments of data before vanishing into fire. The aliens had mocked humanity for decades. Soon they would realize they'd been handed a mask to laugh at while the real face waited behind it. Signal the fleets, Kessler said. Phase 2 begins now. Back aboard Dral's Fong, Admiral KRYLL stood as the first reports of Phase 2 reached him, though he didn't yet know to call it that. Empire patrols along the frontier were vanishing. Communication hubs went dark between one transmission and the next. Supply convoys simply never arrived. No wreckage. No distress calls. Just silence spreading like ink across the stars. Threx slammed a clawed hand against the display. Sabotage. Rebels. Human vermin biting at shadows. KRYLL only watched, his face unreadable. In his mind, he saw again that warship, its impossible speed, the way it had dismantled his strike wing with the precision of a master swordsman cutting through drunken brawlers. And beneath it all, the silence. He turned slowly to his officers. Pull back the frontier fleets. Consolidate around the core systems. Threx spun toward him, incredulous. Pull back? We're winning. Are we? KRYLL asked softly. He gestured toward the darkening patrol routes, the missing fleets, the unraveling edges of their territory. Victories do not vanish without reason, Captain. Something moves against us. Something disciplined. He didn't add what haunted him most. Something patient. The Council would call him cautious. Cowardly even. Let them. He had survived too many campaigns to mistake this for random resistance. Humanity was shedding its skin, revealing something cold beneath it. And KRYLL, for all his pride, felt the first stirrings of respect for his enemy. On the Aegis, Admiral Kessler watched the enemy fleets shifting inward exactly as predicted. Each retreat left supply lines thinner, systems isolated, morale fraying. Humanity hadn't needed overwhelming force. Not yet. They needed the Empire to feel hunted, to make mistakes born of arrogance curdling slowly into fear. The trap was closing. He stood before the viewport, stars wheeling silently beyond. For years humanity had played the role the galaxy expected, brave but outmatched, defiant but doomed. That illusion had cost them colonies, lives, pride. It had also bought them time. Time to finish the stealth fleets. Time to weave the wormhole network. Time to prepare for the moment when the mask would finally drop. Kessler clasped his hands behind his back. Soon KRYLL would see the truth. Soon the whole Empire would. because humanity hadn't been retreating. It had been aiming. Admiral Kryll stood at the center of the Imperial High Council chamber, its towering spires of black metal rising like the fangs of some ancient beast. Holoscreens hovered above the delegates, each one broadcasting fresh reports of missing fleets, silenced outposts, and trade routes that had simply gone dark overnight. The councillors shouted over one another, voices sharp with anger and disbelief. Some demanded vengeance. Others dismissed the disappearances as coincidence or rebellion. Kryll said nothing. He let the chaos swell like a storm tide, his eyes fixed on the expanding list of losses. The Empire had ruled this quadrant for centuries. Defiance always began with noise, protests, speeches, bombastic acts of resistance. Humanity's silence felt wrong. It was the quiet of hunters, not prey. When the council finally gave him the floor, Kryll's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You are not facing rebels. You are not facing pirates. You are facing a species that has stopped losing. Some scoffed openly. Chancellor Voreth, his crest plated in gold, leaned forward with the confidence of a man who had never fought beyond a hollow simulation. One species against an empire that spans 1,000 worlds? Absurd. Their attacks are opportunistic at best. Kryll turned slowly toward him. Opportunistic forces do not dismantle 3 patrol fleets in under an hour. They do not strike across 5 systems simultaneously. They do not leave us blind before we even grasp what happened. Another counselor, feathers trembling with indignation, slammed her fist against the table. You're asking us to believe the humans of all creatures threaten the Empire itself. Kryll let the question hang before answering, his voice quieter now, forcing them to lean in. I have fought them. You have not. And I tell you this, we have mistaken restraint for weakness. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Restraint was not a word often used in war councils. Kryll replayed, in his mind, the single recording recovered from Halidus Prime, the human warship emerging from the void, weapons igniting like controlled fury rather than chaos. Precision born of discipline. It had haunted him since the day he saw it. Voreth laughed coldly. So the great Admiral Kryll fears savages with upgraded rifles. Perhaps age has softened you. Kryll's gaze locked on him, unreadable. He did not rise to the bait. The council had already decided what it wished to believe. When the session ended with orders to press the assault on Earth itself, Kryll felt the weight of inevitability settle on his shoulders. They had given him more ships, more soldiers, more pressure to crush the humans quickly. It would not matter. The Empire's strength had become its blindness. As he left the chamber, Captain Threx fell into step beside him, scowling. Let them talk, Admiral. Once we take Earth, this nonsense ends. Kryll didn't answer at first. He watched the bustling corridors as they walked, aides and officers moving with the false confidence of a fleet that still believed victory inevitable. Finally, he said, Do you know what unsettles me most, Threx? Not their victories. Their efficiency. No wasted shots. No grandstanding. Even their transmissions, silent, calm, surgical. As if war for them is no longer chaos, but memory. Threx gave a dismissive snort. Memories don't win wars. Firepower does. Kryll stopped walking.
No.
Understanding wins wars. And we do not understand them anymore. Across the void aboard the Aegis, Admiral Kessler reviewed the next phase of operations. His officers moved around him like parts of a single organism, each step practiced, each command precise. The wormhole gates were in position. Drone fleets waited in darkened orbits, power cores cold to avoid detection. Kessler studied the latest intelligence from the Empire's core systems. The enemy still massed their forces near Earth, exactly as planned, leaving trade hubs, shipyards, and communications relays exposed across half their territory. He knew Kryll would see the trap forming. He could almost feel the alien admiral's unease growing with each vanished fleet. But the Empire's arrogance worked against him. The Council would demand Earth fall before any retreat could be considered. Humanity hadn't needed to divide the Empire's fleets. Pride had done it for them. An operations officer approached, voice low. Admiral, our recon drones confirm increased enemy traffic toward Seoul. Timetable unchanged.
Kessler nodded.
Unchanged. Let them come. For years humanity had endured humiliation, the Empire advancing unchecked while diplomats begged for peace the Council never intended to honor. Every lost colony, every dead civilian transport, every scorched city had led to this moment. Not vengeance, not conquest. Calculation. He watched the enemy fleet positions shifting on the holomap like pieces across a board, unknowingly moving toward the point where the trap would close forever. Hours later, aboard Dral's Fong, KRYLL stood alone in his quarters, lights dimmed, reviewing fragments of human history captured from abandoned data archives. The images moved across the screen in grainy silence. Armored soldiers clawing through mud during the Terran World Wars, mushroom clouds devouring cities, carrier fleets burning at Midway, drones striking targets from skies blackened with smoke. Humanity had slaughtered itself for centuries with the same cold precision it now turned on the Empire. KRYLL watched the footage with a growing heaviness in his chest. This was no species discovering war for the first time. This was one that had been tempered by it until hesitation burned away, leaving only efficiency behind. He thought of the Council's laughter, of Voritha's gold-plated arrogance. They had not seen these images. They had not watched soldiers advance through chemical storms or cities rebuilt after annihilation. KRYLL whispered to the empty room, "You fools have no idea what you've provoked." For the first time in decades, he felt something he had nearly forgotten. The sense that history was beginning to turn, slowly, inevitably, against them. He straightened as the alert came through. The Empire's Grand Fleet had entered the Sol system. The Council demanded KRYLL lead the final strike himself, to shatter Earth before whatever resistance lingered could rally. KRYLL looked once more at the frozen image of a human soldier raising a flag over ruins still smoking from battle. A victory bought with fire and blood. He turned off the screen. "Very well," he said softly. "Let's see what waits for us in the dark." The Empire's Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace in a blaze of energy, 1,000 warships encircling Earth like wolves around a wounded prey. KRYLL stood on the command deck of Dral's Fong, watching the blue planet gleam below, its oceans reflecting the distant sun as though mocking the firepower arrayed above them. Every gun in orbit now waited for his word. One command, and Earth would burn. Yet he felt no triumph. Reports flooded in as the fleet tightened formation. Human defenses appeared minimal, scattered orbital platforms, a few outdated carriers, atmospheric fighters too small to threaten the Empire's Leviathans. It looked easy. Too easy. KRYLL's instincts screamed warning even as his officers celebrated impending victory. "Targets locked," Captain Threx said, claws drumming eagerly across the console. "They can't stop this, Admiral. One strike, and it's finished." KRYLL's gaze stayed fixed on the planet below. Clouds drifted across blue oceans, cities glittering faintly on the night side. But no transmissions came from Earth. No pleas. No threats. No attempts at negotiation. Just silence. He knew predators when he saw them. "Hold fire," KRYLL ordered. Threx turned sharply. "Admiral?" KRYLL's voice stayed calm. "Something waits for us down there. I can feel it." Before Threx could argue, alarms screamed across the deck. Wormhole signatures erupted all around the Empire's fleet, hundreds of them, tearing open in precise patterns like the blooming of some vast, mechanical flower. Out of each gate slipped human warships, black-holed and silent, their weapons already hot. KRYLL froze as the Aegis emerged directly before the Dral's Fong, its angular armor swallowing starlight, its gun batteries pivoting with predatory grace. Admiral Kessler's voice came through every channel, calm as a knife sliding between ribs. "Leave Earth's orbit. Now. No threats. No ultimatums. Just certainty." Threx snarled, ordering the Empire's fleet to open fire, but KRYLL raised a hand too late. The first human salvo struck like the wrath of physics itself, kinetic lances punching through capital ships before shields could cycle, drone swarms tearing engines from cruisers, railguns shattering carriers in single shots. Empire formations crumbled instantly. KRYLL watched in stunned silence as his fleet died around him. There was no chaos among the humans, no wasted motion or triumphant cries. Every strike was clean, deliberate, inevitable. He realized then the humans had never been defending Earth. They had been waiting here, drawing the Empire's strength into one place to cut its throat in a single night. Threx shouted for retaliation, for retreat, for anything, but human wormhole gates kept opening, fleets pouring through like an unstoppable tide. Empire ships fled in disarray, only to be hunted down with mathematical precision. The Aegis targeted the Drall's Fong next. A single shot disabled its engines, another gutted its weapons. Not destroyed.
Crippled.
Kessler's voice returned, cold and steady. This war ends now. Surrender or vanish. KRYLL stared at the tactical displays, the Empire's grand fleet reduced to wreckage within minutes. He felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him, every conquest, every arrogant dismissal of the enemies they crushed. The Empire had believed humanity primitive because it bled when struck. They had mistaken scars for weakness instead of warning. Slowly, he gave the only order left. Stand down. Across the surviving Empire ships, weapons went dark. Kessler's fleets ceased fire instantly, holding position with predator stillness. Not advancing. Not retreating. Simply waiting, surrounding the remnants of a once unstoppable empire like wolves circling a wounded beast. KRYLL demanded to speak directly with Kessler. When the human admiral's face appeared on the screen, weathered and expressionless, KRYLL expected gloating.
Demands.
Revenge. Instead, Kessler regarded him with the calm of a man extinguishing a fire. You should have left us alone, Kessler said. KRYLL met his eyes. We didn't understand what you were. No, Kessler replied softly. But you will. Earth receded behind him on the screen as human fleets pushed deeper into Empire space, wormhole by wormhole, system by system, dismantling supply lines and shipyards with the same terrifying precision. The Empire collapsed not with screams, but with silence, one relay after another going dark until even the Council's voices vanished from the network. Weeks later, KRYLL stood aboard Aegis, now a prisoner, yet treated with cold formality. Human officers moved past him with the same efficiency he had seen in battle, their discipline more unnerving than any cruelty. Kessler approached him at the observation deck, both men watching Empire worlds burn in the distance, not from vengeance, but from the chaos of power broken too suddenly to control. We'll help rebuild, Kessler said. Stability serves everyone, even former enemies. KRYLL studied the human admiral carefully.
Not conquerors, then.
Just rulers? Kessler shook his head. Guardians. If you want a title, keep it. Names don't matter. Order does. The offer came days later. KRYLL would govern surviving alien systems under human oversight, a voice for a people no longer feared, but not erased either. Mercy, delivered without kindness. When KRYLL accepted, it wasn't submission. It was survival. He had seen enough of humanity's efficiency to know extinction followed only if they chose it. On the day the last Empire resistance surrendered, Kessler stood alone at the Aegis viewport, watching the stars shift as new wormhole gates linked world after world under human control. No celebration, no speeches, just the quiet hum of engines and the knowledge that history had tilted forever. Humanity had not wanted war, but now war had shaped it into something the galaxy would never challenge again. Kessler spoke softly to no one in particular, his reflection pale against the starlight. We were dreamers once. That age is over. Behind him, fleets moved outward toward the edge of the map where no empire, no council, no rivals yet waited. The silence of victory carried with it a promise heavier than any threat. The age of humanity had begun.